Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Matt McGachy, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians, talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. If you've ever wanted to sneak backstage and share a beer with one of your favorite musicians, well, Vox and Hops is the podcast for you. This week on the podcast, I dropped an amazing episode with Mike Barino from Audio Technica Canada. There's this episode and over 430 other ones to help you enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. So what are you waiting for? It's time to become a Vox and Hops head. Cheers!
Nothing so loud.
Hey friends, today's guest is lead vocalist and guitarist Glen Phillips of the Santa Barbara, California rock band Toad the Wet Sprocket. Together, Glen and I dissect their 1991 breakout smash hit, All I Want, taken from their third album and major label debut, Fear. Glen was very upfront and honest regarding the role and leadership that producer Gavin McKillop provided during the sessions. How he took a good band, albeit a ragtag group of musician friends, and made them into a cohesive rock and roll machine. We've heard this before on Chris DeMakes a Podcast, where a band or artist feels like a particular track is just another song in the bunch that was written super quickly without much thought, and was almost left on the cutting room floor. Such was the case with All I Want, which was buried as the 10th song out of 12 on the album. At first I thought Glen was being dismissive regarding the song's lyrical content, but truth be told, there is deep meaning behind the song's lyrics. And it was funny hearing how the band was staunchly against doing radio remixes for their songs back in the day, only to realize through the wisdom of age that it was the right thing to do. Something I can truly relate to. For all this and some deep philosophical thought, don't touch that dial.
Hey, hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a Podcast. Hey, hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a Podcast. Hey, hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a Podcast. Hey, hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a Podcast.
Yeah, it was bizarre to not tour for 18 months or whatever it is, and then just did 2 months with Toad, and I had what was supposed to be 3 shows that turned into 2 weeks solo, and of course it went back, so I only had a week at home to basically unpack and repack and just start to calm down, and then was out again.
Well, before we get going here, I just want to say that in 1991, the song we're going to talk about today, All I Want, was released in 91. That was my first year of college at the University of Florida. This song, as you know, was everywhere. And we always talk on my show, Chris and I always talk about memories and those memories that are attached to songs. And it's been such a treat for me you hear this song everywhere still today, grocery stores, wherever you're at, but to sit down and really dive into this song, man, I went straight back to my first apartment in college. I have such great memories of that time period, and I love that's what music still does to me. And I've always loved this song. It's such a great pop song. So I want to give the listeners a little bit of info on Toad. The band was formed in 1986 just outside of Santa Barbara, California. The members having known each other since high school. Glen was only 15 when the band started. They self-released their first album, Bread and Circus, in 1989. The follow-up album, Pale, was released in 1990. During the recording of the album, the band signed to Columbia Records. Their third album, Fear, was released in 1991, featuring the hit singles All I Want and Walk on the Ocean, another amazing song. I struggled. I wanted to do Walk, I wanted to do All I Want, but I went with the real big one, I guess. They're both huge. But both songs reached the top 20 of the Billboard Hot 100, and the album went platinum. Fear was recorded at Granny's house in Reno, Nevada. It was produced by Gavin McKillop, who had worked as an engineer on 80s bands such as The Human League, Simple Minds, and Midnight Oil, and went on to produce albums from the Goo Goo Dolls, Bare Naked Ladies, and MXPX. The band released their next album, Dulcinea, in 1994, which spawned the hit singles Fall Down, which reached #1 on the U.S. modern rock charts, and Something's Always Wrong. This album went gold. Their next album, Coil, came out in 97 and featured the hit Come Down. And in 1998, the band formally broke up, and Glen started a solo career during the breakup. He has released 5 studio solo albums to date and toured constantly behind them. The band worked together on and off for years. In December of 2010, they released their first new studio track in 11 years, which was a holiday track, It Doesn't Feel Like Christmas, which I went and listened to that. It's awesome. A cover of a Sam Phillips original. The band released a new album, New Constellation, in October of 2013, and their latest record, Starting Me Now was released on August 27th, 2021. So just want to congratulate you on still being out there and all your success.
Thank you. It's distant, but it's appreciated.
Well, it's, as you know, to navigate as long as you guys have through this business, there's lots of peaks and valleys that we go through.
Lots of peaks and valleys. Yeah, we've been on a low mesa for a long time, but it's been all right.
That's probably the best piece of advice I ever read. I read Steven Tyler's autobiography years ago, and then he said, if you can ride the peaks and the valleys, you might have a chance in this business. But take us back to this time period, 1990 or so. Do you remember writing All I Want?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember exactly where I was writing the main kind of dun 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 dun. I would tend to play these like picky mechanical parts that I couldn't quite pull off. So Todd would kind of riffify them and make them sound more musical. And I remember the initial version of the song that I had, the melody was a little more like it was all these long strings, and Dean early on kind of saying, could you just have less in there? I think his best contribution to the song was just asking me to sing less words. And so
we don't like to hear that sometimes as songwriters.
No, but it's true. It was there was a lot about it that I like. And when we did the first demo, I had this melody that was kind of relentless. And yeah, we cleared it out. We almost didn't record that song and almost didn't record Good Intentions, which was a single later on. Just because we thought they sounded too pop, and we were identifying ourselves as an indie band and like really deep, and this, even though the verses are a little bit melancholy, the chorus sounds super happy, and we that wasn't kind of our vibe. So it almost didn't make the record. And even as far as being a single, I think it was our third single. The album had already been out for 9 months.
Well, let me talk about that for a second, because I noticed that the song is the 10th track out of the 12-song record, and you don't bury a hit single at number 10. So did you just not think this was the one?
I mean, if you ask Donnie Einer or any of the people at Sony, they knew from day one that this was it, and it was all part of their genius setup, but nobody had any idea.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Or it wouldn't have come out after night. I mean, once our product manager, Tom Gibson, actually, like, they were ready to stop the album and send us back to the studio. And he was the one who was like, just one more single, and let's see what happens. But you were asking about the writing. I mean, mostly I remember, like, we had a practice place near some storage spaces in Santa Barbara, and we had, like, there were these old Akai cassette, like, it was a large, like a VHS cassette style 12-track recorders with a built-in mixing board. We'd graduated from the 4-track to that thing, and so we had that. And I mean, we were just going in and so excited to make our first real record, right? We'd done these 2 records. We were all living at our parents' houses, and made the first record almost by accident. A friend had asked if we'd be his backup band on a couple songs. And he said, for payment, I'll have you guys record 2 of your own songs, just live in the studio. And
sure,
it took a couple hours, and we're like, that was easy. Like, if we do 8 more, we'll have a record. We should do that. And And so it was a big deal when we did Fear to know that we were going to be going in with a real producer in a real studio. And we wanted to make, at that time, like, I was really into Peter Gabriel and Tears for Fears and Talk Talk and these bands that made, like, these big, awesome records. And we wanted to make a big, awesome record. And we'd been, done these 2 live in the studio records. And we wanted to make something that was, once again, more in that, like, for me, Tears for Fears, Talk Talk, Peter Gabriel world, that was the stuff that I loved the most.
Yeah, those are timeless records, and not just saying that because you're here in front of me, but I think this song's timeless. You know, this song's 30 years old. It was done pre-Pro Tools to tape, and it just it sounds awesome still.
Thank you. Well, I mean, Gavin was a really great producer. I mean, we wrote all these songs before, demoed them all up, and talked to a lot of different producers. And Gavin just taught us so much about, you know, getting the rhythm section to agree, you know, getting the bass and the drums to be really locked up, like taught us how to make our arrangements progress, how to do things that weren't always the same number of bars, how to have a combination of like predictability and nonlinearity, right? And almost like what I talked about earlier with the verse melody, you know, just that its first verse is nothing so loud as hearing when we lie, truth is not kind, you said neither. That balances nicely. But the second one is nothing so loud, closing the heart when all we need is to free the soul. You know, it's like doing these little things that keep you, that are locked enough into a pattern that it's recognizable, but that are also being surprising enough that you don't just get bored, that it's not the same thing over and over again. And Gavin was so good at helping us have these arrangements be dynamic and have these small differences happen and having everything kind of lock in and complement each other. He taught us so much about arrangement. It was a really wonderful relationship with him to take these songs and try to bring them all to the next level. And once again, I think we stepped in with a reasonably strong, you know, collection of material as well. But yeah, it's just funny to think that All I Want was, once again, for us, it was a little too pop. We weren't sure if it should be part of things or not.
Well, we're up over, I think it's been a year and a half now, this podcast, and up over like 80 episodes. I can't tell you how many times I've heard exactly that. This is just another song. We didn't really think, it almost didn't make the album, and here it is, one of your signature tracks.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's entirely representative of us as a band, but it's got a strong bridge, which I think is a thing that we really liked, was having a bridge that would take you to kind of some soaring other place. And I will say, I think All I Want is one of our strongest bridges.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure. That bridge is great.
But also in terms of being a vocal group and having counter melody be a big part of what we do, right? Having that thing in the chorus of, you know, the call and answering and the tight harmonies is also a big part of Toad's sound.
Well, that's what I loved about, you know, especially this record back when it came out, is, you know, the two singles, the main singles from the record, All I Want and Walk on the Ocean. It sounded almost like two different bands, but that in this instance is a good thing. You know, a lot of times it's like, oh, they don't have an identity, but I think that shows you the depth of the songwriting.
It is one of the weird things with Toad. I still have this issue. I write in a lot of different modalities. I feel like Todd's music generally, and Walk on the Ocean was his music. All I Want was my song. There's a way in which his songs like pull us a little more into the center, because he has such a signature sound on guitar and such this melodic kind of parts driven way of playing. You know, his solos are composed, they're melodic. They're not about like a bunch of rock licks. They're about melody. And his parts are really, you know, taking out melodic elements, and they're very composed, I guess is the best way, as opposed to being like a guy in a blues rock band where you can kind of, you know, you're just comping chordally and doing whatever. He's always doing these counter melodies, and it brings this signature sound to the band. I mean, also Dean's bass playing, and he's, man, just not to be busy in a cloudy way, but to be a super melodic bass player. The way he and Randy worked together really is also a signature sound. I mean, you know, Randy was this very kind of lyrically oriented drummer. And so I feel like Todd's songs brought things into a certain center sonically. And then my songs were all over the map, but the band helped, and the sound of the voices together helped kind of identify and pull everything into this center that I don't know if we'd had less of a sound instrumentally, I think it really it wouldn't have had any sense of continuity. And we had just enough of a signature sound to kind of draw everything in towards this center, which has made it hard for me making solo records because my songs are still all over the map, but I have no idea what I sound like. And I mean, it's a thing that I've noticed. I feel like I've had great songs on my solo records, but they're not necessarily great records because Toad has such a signature to it.
A band is the sum of their parts. I've always said it, and I can completely agree with everything you just said. I think I've written some great songs outside of the band, but for me, they don't have that cohesiveness of what I do with my band.
Yeah, there's an automatic thing that we just do that works. And if I tried to replicate it in other projects, it would just be chasing something, but it's definitely greater than the sum of its parts.
Well, you touched on producer Gavin McKillop, and you had mentioned that, he had kind of reeled in your melodies a little bit. Do you recall the demo changing a lot from when you got into the studio with this particular track?
I mean, the main things that shifted, the original lyric, once again, I did some trimming to take it down. Gavin was really good at being Socratic as a producer, meaning I've sat with other people who will immediately take the guitar out of your hands and go, no, you should play this and you should do this. And Gavin would just listen to the song and he'd be like, it sounds too dense in the beginning. And he would just say that, like, there's too much, the melodies, it's just too much. And that was actually Dean's comment before we got to Gavin. And I kind of rewrote and took out a lot. But Gavin was great at being like, third verse, you're just repeating the lyrics from the first verse. It's really, don't you have anything else to say? Are you done? I'm getting bored. And he would often say things in terms of, I'm getting bored, or seems like a cop-out, or there was a reference to sandwiches in one song. He hated food references. He wanted me to take it out. I didn't. He couldn't stand food in songs. But a lot of what he did was just kind of state, or he would say, God, you guys are playing exactly the same thing. You're both just really strumming. Nothing's happening. It's either one of you stop playing guitar or one of you should do something different or harmonize differently. And he was an engineer, but he never picked up an instrument and played a note in the studio with us. He let us find every single solution, but he knew where solutions needed to be found. And so he really taught us to be conscious of those things and to find the answers on our own.
That's so awesome that you guys were that young of a band, your first, real studio with a real producer, and that you were that receptive. That's awesome. Because a lot of times when you're a young artist, you don't want to hear that, wait, this is boring, or, don't tell me how to write my songs.
Well, and I will say also that we didn't have massive budgets. We did a lot of pre-production. So we demoed these things up, and he would come in and work with us for a week or two and then disappear and then come back. So we had months of getting these songs in shape so that by the time we hit the studio, there wasn't a lot of question. I mean, there would be, things on overdubs or some arrangemental questions here and there. But in general, like, especially in tightening up the rhythm section, like, he worked them. They got so tight together and so synced up. And part of that is because there was the combination. We didn't have a budget where we could afford to take forever in the studio, right? We had to know what we were doing and go in and nail it. And so we didn't want to be doing too much experimentation on our basic tracks and have to go back and redo and rework, right? Also, this was pre-Pro Tools. And so you could cut tape a little, but you had to know what the fuck you were doing when you went in the studio. And Gavin complained later. He would talk about post Pro Tools, like going in with bands who would do sloppy tracks or not link up. And he'd go, hey man, we got to get this together. And he'd go, that's your job. And they'd go out to dinner and go out partying and expect that the producer's job was to edit everything into submission. And I think that became really common. And I mean, you also hear stories about bands that would go into the studio, do a bunch of blow, track, And then the producer would call in studio musicians to replace everything they'd done, and the band would come back the next day and go like, wow, we sounded amazing. I knew we were killing it, but I didn't know we were this good. Like, you hear stories about that. But Gavin was just very old school, and he'd grown up at like Air Studios. He'd grown up in London, starting as a T-boy and working his way up to the tape op and working his way up, spot erasing like Kate Bush's vocals. And he had stories about being in the studio with Trevor Horn when they were doing he did like a few days of Owner of a Lonely Heart. Where they would be tracking drums, and Trevor Horn would be like smoking doobies, laying under the mixing console, and like wouldn't say a word for 2 hours. They would do reels and reels of takes, and then he would sit up and go, okay, get a piece of paper, and tell Gavin like, okay, intro fill and first 4 bars from take 6, next 8 bars from take 12, next 2 bars from take 3. And he would give him this insane comp and be like, okay, going out for Curry, and would leave Gavin there
to cut the tape,
to cut the 2-inch tape and make that track happen. And I mean, that's how it used to happen in those studios. So he understood, he was listening so hard to everything and worked us so hard to get it right, even months before we got to the studio. And so it was the best possible thing for us. And I was really happy that, we had to have the humility, because otherwise the album would have sucked, and we wanted to do great. I can be really, how can I say this? I can be very dismissive, and talk about how lucky we were and we were just in the right place at the right, but we also worked our asses off, and Gavin was a great collaborator in doing that.
He sounds like he's a producer right up my alley. I've always equated it. You want to go run the marathon, don't start training a week before. You got to put the 6 months in before you go do it. And I always want to be prepared. Go to this day. You want to talk about relying on Pro Tools and fixing it. You want stuff to get sterile real quick. That's a good way to do it. And it just sounds like he completely and again, you guys were receptive to it, and it just made you that much more of a cohesive unit. And that's awesome.
And even with that, stuff happens in the studio. I mean, one of, as far as studio memories of All I Want, I remember breaking down in tears trying to do we were doing the harmonies on the chorus, which have all these, seconds and sevenths. There's a lot of tight seconds on them. I was really into Bulgarian women's choir stuff. You can't tell it from the rest of the music, but I was really into singing these tight second harmonies, right? Where it's like they're going up and down in this half step, but you're singing these seconds. And we had a 12 string that I could not keep in tune. And we had a 12 string on it, and it was already on the verge of sour. And then I was doing these super tight harmonies, and they were just impossibly sour. And there was nothing I could do to get them right. And I was like, I am the worst fucking singer. I've been beating my head against the wall for hours. And we were going through everything in the track, trying to figure out what it was. And we eventually realized that the bass track was out of tune.
Yeah.
And just enough that, once again, back before everything was auto-tuned and everything, it was just sloppy enough that before you had these really tight, weird harmonies, especially with the 12 string, it all kind of worked. But eventually we were just like, it was hell. We couldn't get it right. It almost didn't we almost gave up on the song entirely because the harmonies were impossible. And then found out the bass was out of tune. Dean recut the bass in 10 minutes, got a tuner, tuned up, recut the bass, and all of a sudden the harmonies worked and everything was okay.
That's awesome.
Silly stuff like that would happen.
That's so interesting, because I've had that exact thing happen. You the last thing you think is it's the bass being out of tune. You're blaming it on the 12 string. You're blaming it on the backing vocal, and it's the one thing you didn't think of. You change that, and there you have it. We're going to jump into the track now. The song is 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The first 6 seconds is like 4 bars of a straightforward rock beat that starts the song, just the drums. And the first 2 words of the song, nothing's so, come in just by itself. And when Glenn says loud, nothing's so loud, that's when the bass and the guitars come in.
Nothing so loud.
There's acoustic guitars pan both left and right. I almost think, is that where I'm hearing the 12 string in there as well?
Yeah, 12 string doubled. Gavin was a big guy on the doubling.
And I wrote in my notes, it's a very airy sound with lots of separation. I love the separation in this verse.
Nothing so loud. It's hearing when we lie. Truth is not kind. And you said neither am I.
Nothing so loud as hearing when we lie. The truth is not kind. And you've said neither am I. What's going on there?
I don't know. What do you think's going on? I don't know. I mean,
do you know? Yeah, I always ask people. Do you like? Was this something in a book that you had some lyrics written down? And you thought it's good enough for this, or did this actually come from some inspiration?
I think in those days, and I could probably take some really valid criticism that I am a little more Howard Jonesy, straight didactic. I always know what I'm talking about. And it's all pop psychology at this point. Back in those days, there was a lot more painting of words, and I would kind of know what it was about, but I had a lot of cop out for, I don't know, man, it's just what I wrote. And so sometimes it's like that. For me, this song is about this tension between the desire to be present in the world and how difficult it can be, right? To tell the truth, to be honest, to really say what's happening, how much it hurts to be lied to, but the truth isn't exactly always what you want to hear either, right?
Yeah.
If there's a way to sum up the beginning. And there's an element of it that is more generalized, but there's also an element of it that feels relational. Mm-hmm. But I used to summarize the whole song in terms of saying it's about like those beautiful passing moments where everything's fine, where everything's perfect, where you're aware, you're not in the past, you're not in the future, and the present is something you're open to. And how that's a really difficult state to keep, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's something you keep forgetting. And in some ways I have better language, now that I've done more meditation, studied mindfulness, studied, there's a lot of particularly Buddhist language around it about that process of kind of constant remembering and forgetting, that we remember to be in the moment. We remember to be present, but then the ego takes us back to the past, takes us back to regret, takes us back to worrying about the future, takes us back to distraction, especially with all the, multitude of, I'm looking at an iPad right next to me on the desk. All
the gadgets we carry with ourselves on a daily basis.
All the screens that make it really difficult for us to ever settle into a moment anymore. The greatest beauty and the greatest creativity comes out of empty moments. There's, I forget, there's some quote of, this is a video of some guy abusing a guy there's some kid like practicing saxophone in front of the Holocaust Museum in New York. And this guy just starts yelling at him.
You any kind of artist? Anybody know who you are? Maybe everybody else wants to enjoy the peace and quiet. This is one of the most important places in all of North America. Who are you? Who are you? You miserable, presumptuous, no talent. You're no artist. An artist respects the silence that serves as the foundation of creativity. You obviously don't have the talent. You don't have enough respect for yourself or other people, or in what it is to express yourself. In music or any other form of creativity. And I'm an NYU film school graduate, sucker. And the School of Visual Arts, and the Academy of Art University in San Francisco. You suck. You're a no talent. If you really had talent, go practice, and then get yourself a gig, instead of ruining the end of the day for everybody down here. You disgrace. You're every everything that's gone wrong in this world. You're a self-consumed, no talent, mediocre piece of shit.
And it's this video. And at some point, the guy who's saying, because he's playing badly, he's just like, silence is the womb of all creativity. I go back to that thought. Silence is the womb of all creativity. It's a beautiful thing to say, even if you're yelling at a saxophonist on the street in New York. And there's a degree of that in this song, not necessarily the first verse. We're only on the first verse, but back to the first verse. Nothing so loud as hearing when we lie. The truth is not kind. You've said neither am I. It's about aiming for truth. It's hard to do. It feels crappy to gloss over things. And it also feels crappy when people are, I'm just saying how I feel, man. Right.
I had no idea. I like where you're going with this. I like that concept. That's something that I've never heard a songwriter say before, and I had no idea looking at these lyrics. And it's so crazy to 30 years after hearing this song as a college kid to be talking to you about this and going, "Wow, that's a really interesting concept for a song."
It's also probably why it doesn't get placed in a lot of commercials. It's not like a straightforward "I love you, baby." It's not "Walking on Sunshine." I mean, it's odd because the chorus, it's all I want is to feel this way, be this close, feel the same. And the line before that, right? The air outside so soft, saying everything, right? That's once again, the natural world, not trying, it's a little bit of the lilies of the field, right?
Sure.
They toil not, but neither do they want. And it's, the natural world is just busy being. It's not trying to be anything. It doesn't have to worry about telling the truth. It simply is. And meanwhile, we are full of clamor. We're talking and inventing and creating and narrating and lying to ourselves, lying to other people, making up stories about what things mean. And even in truth telling, are we saying, I think this? Because you can tell the truth about how you feel, but the truth about how you feel is the tip of the iceberg, right? It's only how you feel. And you can't argue with the truth of a feeling, right? It's your experience internally happened. It doesn't mean that it's based on good information. It doesn't mean, and, even in talking about difficult things, I think, part of the tension we're dealing with these days is everybody, while facts matter greatly, nobody will listen to you if you disregard their feelings. If somebody is telling you, I believe this because my trust has been deeply undercut, whether it's in the political system, in the medical system, these other ways, if you want to have, in my case, let's say I have friends who are in the anti-vax world. If you want to have a conversation with somebody you care about, even if you feel that their informational channels have maybe been corrupted, if you can't listen to why they lost their trust, where they're coming from, we're all seeing the things we want to see based on our personal perspectives. We're all full of confirmation bias. And so we're all lying to ourselves all the time in different ways to different degrees, but we all think we're the exception to that. We all think we're the one rational person in the world and that everybody else is irrational. And if you don't walk into a conversation understanding that you are also, subject to cognitive bias, you are also subject to self-delusion, you are also emotionally guided first and logically guided second, and you are probably not so much rational as rationalizing and using all your intelligence to rationalize what you already think is true. Like, if you don't walk into conversations like that, then soon you just escalate and soon you just argue. Or you just hang out with people who believe all the same things you do for similar reasons, and you never challenge yourself and never question yourself. That's boring too. So I'm
gonna tell you, Glenn, you got me thinking about stuff right now. My head, with my personality, my head's going in a million directions. You got me doing some deep thinking about myself, and everything you're saying is really true. And I think the human ego sometimes doesn't let us say the things that you're saying right now to ourselves of like, yeah, I think I'm right and everybody else in this room's wrong. Well, that's my perception, but that's not necessarily the truth.
Yeah. And which doesn't mean that we aren't occasionally right. I mean, and there is, once again, if you're talking vaccine stuff, and I know people have really deep, once again, I know people who lost their trust in the medical community at great expense, right? At the death of people they loved that medicine couldn't save, or in working with people who are at the far edges of, the side effects of medicine. And if all you ever see are the worst case scenarios of that, you're not going to trust, so there's a lot of reasons that people lose their trust. And that I really understand and have a lot of compassion for. One of the things I have trouble understanding is why people would put their medical faith in a guy like Brett Weinstein, who's not a medical doctor, number one, and is like kind of drowning in his own white male grievance. And I don't understand that kind of person being who you then place your trust in. And that part's hard for me, although I understand that grievance, once again, is a common thing with white men. But and that we have a tendency to look, if you're looking at things like ivermectin, like putting faith in a couple of studies, which actually the only major studies of that have been, were found to be highly plagiarized and falsified. But it's a narrative that fits so well into distrust that it's really deeply appealing. It's so emotionally overwhelmingly appealing that the lack of true science around it is, that narrative would fit so well and be so appealing, so deeply appealing. And as well, ignoring vaccine science is similarly appealing to this, idea of the great fight of, this David and Goliath fight. And I've seen friends of mine just disregard huge swaths of, well-researched, double-blind evidence and take in stuff that isn't. And I have to know that although I think I'm perfectly rational, I was raised by scientists. I like to think that I'm on the right side of the actual research, but I'm not a frickin' doctor either. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. And my trust lies in different places. And these answers sound good to me, but I'm also willing to say I could be totally wrong and deluded about any number of things. In some of these cases, I don't think I am, but it doesn't mean I can't talk to people who believe in something differently than what I believe in, and want to understand them and still love them and still be actually close friends with them. And I think as time goes on, those skills are more and more important because we are being fractionalized and broken apart. And I don't believe in a conspiracy around this. I think it's just a fact of modern life and human psychology and the power of social media and the power of tribalism. And it's not a shitstorm that I'm convinced we're going to survive, but I think it's really important to be aware of.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with that last statement. Well, we'll try to get
digress.
Back we'll try to get back into the song. Wow, you took me on a ride just now, Glenn, and I'm with my friggin' head. I'm like in another world right now, thinking of all these things. I'm going to try to reel myself in here.
I'm nothing if not tangential.
We're at the pre-chorus now.
We're at the pre-chorus. We're at the fourth line of the song,
and we're only 23 seconds in the song. That's what I love about this tune. I feel that there's no fat on this song.
You're outside so soft, saying everything.
The lyric is, and the air outside so soft is saying everything. And you repeat the word everything. In this part, the guitars are there's a guitar panned left that comes in here playing like in a arpeggiated tasty lick. Mm-hmm. The B3 organ has a swell on the word everything that leads into chorus number 1. I love that.
All I want is to feel this way, to be this close, feel the same. All I want is to feel this way. The evening speaks, feel it say.
And chorus number 1 comes really quick. If you get to a chorus before a minute, that's fast. We're at 39 seconds.
Don't bore us. Get to the chorus.
Yeah, don't bore us. Get to the chorus. And a new clean guitar picking pattern comes in here. panned a bit to the right with like kind of a chorusy effect on it. And the organ is holding down pads here underneath, but it becomes noticeable as the other instruments decay before the next instrumental section.
Yeah, and that's Dean, our bass player, on all the keys on these, by the way. And
oh, cool.
Kind of his first experience with playing organ, I guess. It was another one of those things we learned from Gavin, was like Dean would initially tend to voice things really fully on the Hammond. And that thing with the Hammond, it's like one note's great, an interval is a lot, a triad is a whole lot. And just learning to like keep that left hand off, left hand works the Leslie, learning the pedals, like, and so we'd all be sitting there like pulling stops. Gavin was teaching us how to pull the stops out. So Dean be playing, we'd be pulling stuff. Like it was this great interactive experience. Dean did awesome on the keyboards, though.
No, but the keys, like especially B3, you don't realize what those can do to guitars and complement them. And if you layer them right, sometimes you don't even hear them, but you feel them, and that's so important. I feel that's part of this chorus, and the lyric is, "All I want is to feel this way." And here you get the first harmony in the song on "To be this close, to feel the same. All I want is to feel this way. The evening speaks, I feel it say." So you get harmonies on each of those lines, and they're kind of odd harmonies, as you were speaking of a moment ago. And the other thing I love here, Glenn, is this is not a very fast song, and I feel like the shuffle on the hi-hat that is happening here had to be there because it keeps the chorus. It kind of makes the chorus feel like it's faster than it is.
Yeah, Randy loved 16ths on that. It's like,
I think they need to be there.
It's a signature thing with like his deal, and he had such a great internal feel on them too, that it's not staccato. It's a very rolling. A rolling feeling. Yeah,
because I said to myself, I'm like, if this was just a straight hi-hat, a closed hi-hat, even an open hi-hat without that shuffle, this thing's not moving here.
Yeah, the internal groove he got on that is really great.
It's awesome. And, harking back to what you said a moment ago, I don't know if this could make it into a commercial. I mean, these lyrics here, this is a pretty straightforward lyric in the sense that I feel like anybody could kind of grasp this. And is that kind of what you were going for here?
We weren't thinking super commercially, if that makes sense. We weren't thinking of having hits, and we can talk about that later. Like in that, we thought of ourselves as, even the word alternative band, wasn't a thing. We didn't think of ourselves as a commercial band.
Hey, don't go anywhere. Chris DeMakes a Podcast will be right back after a few words from our sponsors.
The number you have reached is 100.7 WMMS.
It wasn't just a radio station, it was a lifestyle.
Cleveland is a rock and roll city for sure.
Get down! The Wrath of the Buzzard. WMMS. Cleveland.
The rise and fall of one of the most iconic radio stations in America. Profiles, The Wrath of the Buzzard, PROH Files. Subscribe now wherever you get podcasts.
Hey everybody, if you like Chris DeMakes a Podcast, I'm going to assume that you like music podcasts. And if you like music podcasts, check out One Hit Thunder. Each week, we dive into a one-hit wonder, and along the way, we gain some knowledge and have some laughs. Lou Bega, Crazy Town, Harvey Danger, The New Radicals, Aha. We're over 100 episodes in now, and to paraphrase the great Matthew Wilder, nothing's going to break our stride. Subscribe to One Hit Thunder wherever you get your pods. And now, on with the show.
We were on a major label, but we went with Sony because Sony, Columbia gave us total creative control. We got to pick our producer. We got to pick what was on the album. And we had our A&R guy for this album was this guy, Ron Oberman. Basically, he set up meetings with a whole bunch of producers we wanted to meet with. And we met with them. We chose Gavin. We got to work at the studio we wanted to, and we didn't even talk singles until the album was done. We made the record that we wanted to make. And so, and the 90s were weird, I think, in that, like, we didn't even get signed on purpose. We had, I think, artistic ambitions, but not commercial ambitions. And we had this kind of pugnacious, like, we don't need to play your game, like this attitude about it. And if you remember the era too, that was the era where, like, Counting Crows wouldn't sing Mr. Jones, or he would, like, totally obscure the melody of it.
Nirvana wouldn't play their hit. It was a
Pearl
thing.
Jam wouldn't play their hit. Like, everybody was signing to major labels and then kind of spitting into their faces, right? Acting like it was a really weird era. Like, nobody would do that anymore. Like, people want to do well now.
Yeah. It was a very, very strange time. And I remember thinking that was odd back then, even as a younger person and being in a band myself. I'm like, I never quite got that.
I don't know why that was the vibe at the time, but we had that vibe. We would have rather have been cool than been successful. And what the irony of it was, we ended up being successful for half a moment and losing all our cool. we were cool up until we had a hit, and then we were hated. But that's a whole other story. But that part's trippy.
The part after the chorus, I like this instrumental section. I'm calling it like a post-chorus instrumental section. It only happens once, and this section mimics the pre-chorus, but the arpeggiated guitar here is front and center. It's a different sound. It's not something you hear in the rest of the song, and I just think this is a great setup for verse 2.
Nothing so cold, it's closing the heart when all we need is to free the soul. But we wouldn't be that brave, I know.
The verse 2 lyric is nothing so cold as closing the heart when all we need is to free the soul, but we wouldn't be that brave, I know.
Mm-hmm.
And do you recall, again, these lyrics being the same as the demo, or was there some change going on here? And did Gavin have a say in that? I think this part could be stronger.
No, I think that remained. I think I greatly reduced the first verse. I think this verse, and once again, Gavin, like, would always just go, could you do better? He would leave it there. He never like suggested a single word to me. Like, what if you said it this way? He was always just like, what if you said it differently? You go figure it out.
That's awesome, though.
And so if I'm thinking about the second verse, and I mean, second verse, once again, pretty straightforward, right? Closing the heart when all you need is to, it's really hard to face life and this goes back into the philosophical stuff, but like, we spend a lot of time running from discomfort and distracting ourselves, getting lost in grievance, getting lost in ambition, getting lost in things that I don't think really matter. And the trick of, like, the strength of vulnerability is that instead of, like, not feeling the hard feelings, is like gaining capacity around them, but not stuffing them down, but like growing bigger in their face. Like, maybe that's for me just because I feel like my real work has always been, there are people who are entertainers. There are people who are, are artists who are dealing with intellectual work or breaking down stylistic walls or virtuosity, or, there are all these kind of lanes of artistic expression or simply entertainment capability, like singing, dancing, making people happy, like putting on something big. And I feel like for me, I've always been trying to find some emotional or spiritual truth. And when I was a kid, I just felt so much. I didn't understand how anyone else operated in the world. It felt like if everybody was having the same emotions I was feeling, then everybody would always be on the verge of exploding. Like, I was always on the verge of crying. Like, I had such strong emotions, I didn't know what to do with them.
That's weird. You're a lead singer in a band.
I guess. But But with that, there's this kind of, what do you do with that? And how do you narrate that? And I think probably because my father turned me on, like with I had a bar mitzvah. I was, raised in a Reform Judaism, which was very ethical, but not very mystical, right? Not very spiritual. My understanding or my experience of it, and I know there's a lot of mystical Judaism and spiritual work in the Jewish world, but my experience of it was very much about kind of, ethics, obligation to others, doing the right thing in the world. It was like the story is God. You don't need to believe in any of that if you don't. It's like early on, it was like, I think this is fake. He's like, it might be, but the important thing is to be good to people. Can you do that? I'm like, yeah, sure, that makes sense. So, but my dad was taking me to the Zen Priory for meditation courses and giving me, books on Sufism, like Idris Shah books, the Nasruddin books, and giving me the Tao Te Ching. And so he was giving me this kind of more Eastern education, which had more of that appeal to the spirit, and not spirit in this kind of immortal soul sense of that, but in the sense of the emotional life that is not about achieving worldly things, but is more centered on like being truly present in the world, like opening your heart further, seeing how far you can open it and not curling into anger or hurt. Yeah. And kind of questioning the illusions of the modern world and, the acquisition of money, the acquisition of fame, the acquisition of, all the markers of success that we're taught to have. And so for me also, and, these things are found, Mary Oliver, always talks about, they're in the natural world. Everyone talks about how they're in the natural world. And so this song is always kind of pulling between, it's the air, the evening, the simplicity and openness of the natural world with the conflict of human relation and narration and the difficulty of, living a human life.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm really, when you first started saying, wait, what do you think it's about? I thought you were just going to be like, these are kind of just some words I threw down, but this is pretty deep, man. What's here? It's a lot more than what it appears to me.
It's been said in deeper ways by smarter people, but it's my, but it's also, and if you'd chosen Walk on the Ocean, it literally would have been like, actually, I have no idea what it means. And I wrote that lyric in 15 minutes because we were recording a demo of it. And Todd was like, can you put a vocal down and can you just write something and change it later? And that was the lyric. That's gobbledygook. But this song was, about that particular tension. And it's not the definitive work in that respect. But I mean, I feel like I've been circling around that same subject matter in different ways for 30 years. It's like, how do you be a human being and also show up? How do you not shut down? How do you not let the pain of life delude you into being asleep? And how do you not get just addicted to a feeling of the joy of expansion, right? Trying to always seek a peak experience, because that's peak experiences are also just peak experiences. Like, why isn't it our constant state, right? We just have these moments. And at some level, like happiness is about being able to just almost like a paint by, connect the dots of, you create this shape by
fleeting moments.
Remembering a moment where you weren't so worried about the little stuff or even worried about what you imagine to be the big stuff, but actually isn't. And you forget and you come back to it, and you forget and you come back to it. And that's what a human life is. Or you just give up and watch TV.
Which is good too.
Which is okay. It's okay. It's sad, but it's
getting into pre-chorus too. I like this pre-chorus because there's one subtle difference.
If I know the air outside so soft, confessing everything.
The lyric lyric is, "And the air outside so soft." And the first time you say is saying everything. And here you say confessing everything, and you repeat everything. Do you recall, again, was that something where, the producer Gavin McKillop said, don't you have anything else to say?
Probably he said, yeah.
Okay, so we may be able to give him credit for that, because
I don't know.
but I love stuff like that. I love one word change. It still feels the same as the first time, the pre-chorus. The melody's the same, but it's that one slight change.
Yeah.
It just keeps it interesting to the listener.
And I've always liked songs that switch perspective. If it's a he, she, we, right? You, I, they, like switching things on the chorus really subtly, for me, makes a song about, how can I say that? There's this pull between specificity and generality in art. And some stuff, you can be really specific, thinking of country songs. Malcolm Gladwell talks about this in one of his podcasts. He has one on The King of Tears, I think it's called. Great episode. You should listen to it. But he's talking about specificity in country music. It's like, that he stopped loving her today. He's talking about he had underlined in red every single "I love you." It's this letter. It's like, it's pure narrative. It's absolute. You know exactly what is happening, where the settings are. And there's also this thing between, a larger philosophical discussion. I like things that are ambivalent, and ambivalent in the sense of, ambivalent gets misused into meaning you don't really care about something. I'm ambivalent. I don't know. But ambivalent is actually that you feel strongly in oppositional ways about something. You really love something and you really don't want to do it, right? You want to and you don't. Ambivalence is that dissonance, going back to a second harmony where notes are beating against each other. For me, I like complex harmony where notes beat. And I like ambivalent emotions where the emotion is not just being happy. It's being happy with a good dollop of melancholy and a backdrop, and knowing that the happiness won't last.
You just summed up the choruses. That's how I feel about this chorus, that you say that. The harmony choices that you picked here. It is a very poppy chorus, probably one of the more poppy choruses, at least at the time, that you guys had, but it has an underlying sense of melancholy you're speaking of.
So yeah, that tension and that, and going into the bridge, which is this huge expansion and freedom, and then heading back into the tent, and so I like to have songs that are not super specific, because then I feel like 10 years later, rather than remembering oh, I remember that day when that thing happened and I wrote that song about that thing. It's like, oh, I remember this set of feelings. I still have that set of feelings.
Yeah.
Still going on. And I mean, that's the difference in the place I write from. And, the unfortunate side effect of that is there's maybe a lot of repetition, but I also notice the teachers that I really appreciate, whether it's somebody like Mary Oliver or Thich Nhat Hanh, or, it's like they say a lot of the same stuff over and over, if your message is, usually wake up to this moment, and it's really hard to wake up to this moment, you're going to repeat that over and over again. But the waking up to this moment is where you are able to do things like listen to other people, be more compassionate, be more loving, contribute more to others, find peace in yourself. I think that's the base root of that. And there are other philosophies that would say, just start faking it till you make it, which also works.
Well, chorus 2 is the same as chorus 1. The lyrics the same. All I want is to feel this way, to be this close, to feel the same. All I want is to feel this way. The evening speaks, I feel it say. And then we get into this bridge, which is, I love this bridge. It is just such a left turn, but just it's awesome, and it just lifts right here.
And it won't matter now. Whatever happens will be. Though the air speaks of all will never be. It won't trouble me.
The lyric is, and it won't matter now. Whatever happens will be. Through the air speaks of all will never be. It Won't Trouble Me. The organ pads come in here super loud, and a pair of slightly overdriven stereo guitars, I think, come in here. They're just kind of there. They're not too loud, and there's this kind of like noodly guitar I wrote panned off to the left, and the vocals just soaring here, and it just, this bridge just lifts. It just really lifts here.
Yeah, it's big bridge, and it's got one little what is the chord that it's going to? It's doing a GCD. It kind of modally shifts a little, like there's one clever chord in it. I forget what it is, but it's like the 5 of 5 or something. You know, it's like major where it would have been minor. These little lifts. I think we were trying to do, Gavin referred to them, it was a Peter Gabriel reference of the David Rhodes distant distorted guitar, right? Where
yeah,
kind of the
that's
power
what it
chords
is.
Deep in the background.
Yeah,
Rhythm of the Heat style, you know. It's like
Drawn across the plain line to the place that is higher. Drawn into the circle, the dancers round the fire. We spit into our hearts.
and the 16ths, right? He stays on those, but he really opens up and straightens out. Yeah, I'm proud of that bridge. I'll just say that.
well, and the lead break in this song from 216 to 231, the guitar almost sounds like, I can't really tell, like maybe a phaser and a chorus and a flanger on it.
It's a Leslie.
Is it a Leslie?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what that is. It sounds like a combination of all three of what I just said, but it is a Leslie.
That's how we got that roll at the end of it.
Yeah.
At the very end. So he's playing the Leslie throughout and kind of playing with the velocity of that. And then at the end, really, and once again, this was before Leslie simulators. So they actually had like a preamp interface with that.
You stumped me there. I did not realize that was a Leslie. I love that part. And this lead, you talk about tasteful, where he doesn't overplay. You know, the lead this is essentially the third pre-chorus. The guitar lick is playing the melody, you know, from the pre-chorus, which that's so odd to do for a solo. If you're going to play a familiar lick at that point, you're going to maybe do something from the chorus or the intro vocal of the song. And it's a really neat thing you did there.
Yeah, well, that's Todd. And I think he came in with that. I forget at what point. I remember it was either Marvin Etzioni or it was, it might have even been Tony Berg when we were talking to producers, talking about George Harrison guitar solos, and like was kind of differentiating. Like George Harrison did a lot of melodic grabbing on his solos, and you can sing every single George Harrison guitar solo.
Oh,
they're not in that mode of, they're not in a lick mode at all.
It's not guitar
right?
wankery at all.
It's not wankery, and there are great licks. I mean, like Mark Knopfler is this incredible combination of melodic and licks-oriented guitar playing. Right?
Yeah.
He reuses the like 4 times in different songs, but he's a god. And Todd is not like he is our lead guitarist, but he's not a typical lead guitarist. He was never in a bar band where he just had to jam it out for 2 hours. And so all his solos are composed, and he very much took that George Harrison idea of the composed guitar solo, something that's taking the melody, but expanding on it. You know, it's compositional. And so once again, I feel like almost all his solos are singable in that same way, which is part of the signature sound of the band.
I'm sure there's songs out there. I cannot think of one. If any of the listeners can write us at our Facebook page, our group, and let us know if you know another solo in a song that is based off the pre-chorus of a song. That tripped me out with this, man. And Glenn, I've heard this song for 30 years. I never thought about it until I started dissecting. I'm like, wait a second. the guitar solo is the pre-chorus. That just never, I can't recall it happened. I'm sure it has, and if someone knows of a song, let me know, because I can't think of one. It's such a cool thing. Chorus 3 is the first double chorus in the song, not a true double chorus, because the end, the back half of it kind of takes off, and it's such a cool rub at the end. The backing vocal and the lead vocal are happening at the same time, but they work so well.
All I want is to feel this way, to be this close, feel the same. All I want is to feel this way. The evening speaks, feel it say, feel so close this way. Let it take me here the same. Let it hold me so this way. I can feel it say.
I'm going to comb through this real quick, and then I have the question of the day for you here. But all I want is to feel this way, to be this close, to feel the same. All I want is to feel this way. The evening speaks, I feel it say. And on the third line, all I want is to feel this way, a high harmony is introduced here on the word all. It's a super high harmony there that I just love. And then the back half is where the vocals are happening. The backing vocal is, all I want is to feel this way, as you're saying, and it feels so close. To be this close, to feel the same. And you're saying, let it take me, yeah. All I want is to feel this way. Let it hold me so. And then the evening speaks, I feel it say, the backing vocal, as you're saying, I can feel it say. And when you're saying feel it say, it's lining up at that point. It's running directly into the backing vocal, and they come together kind of in unison there, which is so cool. And then that great ending harmony there with the B3 slowly fading out to end the song. And my question of the day at this point is, I started racking my brain. I know bands do re-records, there's radio mixes, but the one on the record is different from the one in the video. I'm going back and forth. There was a couple different versions at the end. Do you remember doing different edits, and why?
Basically, the company wanted a radio mix with a famous name. And so Michael Brower was hot at the time, still is. God, that guy's been mixing forever, and he's an amazing mixer. And we were actually really shitty about it at the time. We're like, the album sounds exactly the way we want. Why do we need a radio mix? They're just going to smash it anyway. But they were really insistent. And so Michael did his mix, and it was, very much of the time. It was like, that was the beginning of stuff being more like really hyped compression. So the things were like kind of almost, people don't mix like this anymore. I think it's interesting. I think people kind of mix for earbuds and iPhones now to some degree. But
absolutely, man.
In the day,
different game.
You were mixing for radio, and there was a certain kind of compression and a way of pre-smashing it before the radio ran it through their probably a Dominator too, right? They all had the Aphex.
Yeah. That vocals just hitting you right between the eyes.
Yeah. And so I really like his mix now. At the time, I think we were like, oh, record sounds the way we wanted. This is bullshit. This is record company. But we went with it. And so the video and the single were the Michael Brower mix. And honestly, he did a fantastic job on it. It's got like that great radio and, I don't know if he had done he has these really interesting, like, multi-band and subgroup, like, compression busing.
Well, he was running some kind of gate or something, because earlier in the song, on the second verse there, and I'm going crazy, and I called my producer Chris earlier this morning, and I said, listen to the second line on this version of the song. It's driving me nuts, because nothing's so cold as closing the heart when all we need.
Nothing's so cold, closing the heart when all we need is to free.
On one version, it just sounds like you're saying closing the heart. There's no as there.
Nothing's so cold, closing the heart when all we need is to free.
he's probably gating it because I do a lot. It's closing. I do a lot of
pickup. I call it a pickup. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a gate on his mix that's not there. And I called Chris and what the heck is going on here?
Honestly, when I record my vocals now, I find myself like in Logic a lot of the time cutting and cranking those like those little pickups. I'll do ands and I'm like, oh crap, it's inaudible. Don't want to re-sing it. But I'll boost those things all the time. So yeah, probably he had a gate on it and just didn't make it through.
Yeah, my bass player Roger, he pisses me off with that. He'll be like, dude, it's a throwaway word. Stop that, And I used to hate him for it, and now I get it. He's right. Hi, Roger. But it's like sometimes just at the same time, sometimes those little beautiful mistakes are part of who you are and your emotion, and sometimes it works. And I just found that to be interesting.
Yeah, the different mix, different attitude.
Right on. Well, listen, we're getting near the end here. I just want to thank you so much. I know you just got home from the road, and the last thing I want to do is jump on something like this. You've been super gracious with your time. I love this song, and
thank you.
I just it was really cool to break it apart with you. And before we leave, is there anything you'd like to leave the listeners with? What you got going on with the band coming up, tours, solo? What you got?
Well, we just got off a 2-month tour, put out a new album with very little fanfare. So if you haven't heard about it, go look for it, because that's the only way you're going to find it. So Toad the Wet Sprocket, starting now. And we're going to be out in the summer with Bare Naked Ladies and Gin Blossoms, doing kind of a 90s thing.
Awesome.
So that's June and July.
We had Robin Wilson on the show last year. So that's
sweet.
Really cool.
Yeah. So we're doing that. And then I'll be putting out a solo record late summer, early fall, probably. I got another one in the can. So, well, not quite in the can. I got all tracked, but kind of finishing that up. So just keeping on.
Right on, man. Well, thank you so much, Glenn.
All right. Thank you. Great talking to you. Great to meet you.
Hey, everybody, don't touch that dial. There's plenty more Chris DeMakes a Podcast after a few words from our sponsors.
Hey there, I am Johnny Christ from Avenged Sevenfold, and I've got a podcast called Drinks with Johnny you're going to want to check out. I sit down with a bunch of different people from all different walks of life, from professional wrestlers to actors, comedians, fighters, musicians, everything in between. I'm just looking to make some friends and have a good time doing it. So if that sounds like something you're into, go check out Drinks with Johnny, streaming everywhere now.
Hey, if you need a unique, thoughtful, and inexpensive gift for a friend or loved one, check out iloveenamelpins.com. Make someone's day by giving them a little present to show you care. Over 80 different pins are available, everything from cats and dogs to your favorite celebrities. And to top it off, you can use the discount code ChrisDeMakes at checkout to save 30% on your order. iloveenamelpins.com. Give them something to wear that shows that you care.
As we near the end of the show, here's a band you might not know.
Welcome to this week's Band You Might Not Know. If you'd like your band to be considered for Chris DeMakes a Podcast, all you have to do is email your song via MP3 only and bio to bandyoumightnotknow@gmail.com. This week's featured artist is the Louseketeers from Westchester, New York, featuring Ginger Val on vocals and guitar, Da Chanksta on drums and percussion, and El Chivo on bass and backup vocals. Here's a snippet of their song, Diner Nights in Riverdale.
The Wrap with Chris and Chris.
All right, man. Well, that was a very interesting episode. I don't know that we've ever had a guest give us so much insight as to the inspiration of the song. And yeah, I knew this song had some meaning when you listen to, I'm like you, Chris. I've heard this song for 30 years, loved it, but never realized there was so much behind this one.
Well, it's incredible, yeah, because when he was kind of joking because I said, "What are you saying here?" After the first verse, he's like, "What do you think I'm saying?" You know, and he had, for listeners can't see his facial expression, but he had a grin ear to ear, and of course I laughed, and I thought really like he was going to go with as he said earlier in the episode, he's like, you know what, this song almost didn't make the album. It was just kind of a song we weren't thinking about. And I thought he was going to say, yeah, this was just kind of like some lyrics I just wrote. And then he went into the story. I'm like, wow, there's a lot behind this song.
Yeah. And I thought that it was really interesting. And he started talking about this right away when you got into the song. But he talked about those moments in life when you're in the present and everything is fine. And you could just live in that moment in the present. And that started making me think, and I know I was watching the gears in your head turn too, Chris, is I was thinking about how often I'm living in the present, because I feel like, think about the dynamic of you and I. We're always living in the future. It's like, hey, we're going to line up this guest for 3 months from now. Our bands are doing this tour, this tour, this tour. I've really always... I rarely stop and smell the roses. Sometimes I'll text you and say like, dude, it's awesome we had so-and-so. The episode came out today, and like, let's enjoy this today or something, because it's easy. I don't know. I know a lot of people that live in the past too, which I'm sure you do too. I think I tend to like not ever enjoy the present because I'm too busy thinking about the future.
Yeah, the past and the future are easy to live in because the past already happened and you can relive that, and the future hasn't happened and you have all the what ifs. Staying in the moment, and that's what transcendental meditation and all that stuff's about, is to stay in the moment, enjoy the spiritual being of right now, and that's hard to do.
It's nearly impossible for me to do that. and I think, yeah, exactly. I think he started referencing a little bit of that too. Maybe that's why people meditate. It's something that I don't really understand, but maybe I should try to understand.
It's so funny. I just thought of something. There's been times I've been on stage playing festivals. I'll be in Switzerland playing to 30,000 people, main stage at some festival. I'm playing, singing to this audience. My hands are moving around the fretboard. I'm singing. I'm sweating. There's all this energy in the crowd. My bandmates are running around me, and I'm thinking, did I pay the water bill this month?
Right. Dude, it's crazy. People would never, ever think that. And yeah, Chris, I haven't played that big of shows, but I played some decently big shows. Same kind of thing. You're thinking about the dumbest stuff. You're up there, your body, your hands, your voice, they're all doing these things that are kind of muscle memory and natural. And it's not that you're not enjoying the moment, but you're thinking about other things. People would never think that that's happening, but it is.
Nope.
Another thing that I thought was really true, I think I've been thinking about this a lot lately too, is that we all think that we're the one rational person in the world. Like we all think that about ourselves, and it's hard to step outside of yourself and be like, you know what, maybe I'm not completely right about this or that. That's a hard thing to do. And, in myself, I'm really trying to have moments where I grow. And when I realize them, I like to vocalize it like, hey, I thought this a week ago, but now I think this. I something happened in my experience, and try to be, I feel like the whole world is so set in their ways that it's good to be, at least open to ideas,
Yeah, emotions are sometimes second by second, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day. And I always give the example, it's like waking up and you're angry about something, and I'm going to show them, and you got this email, and I'll write the email, but I don't send it right away now. I'll go have breakfast, go for a walk, 11 o'clock, 11:30, I'll come back, sit down and reread it, go, thank God I didn't send that damn thing.
I do the absolute same thing. And that's why you'll hear like that advice of like, if you're, whatever emotions you're feeling, write it down, and then come back to, it's smart, because if you act purely on, what you're feeling at the moment, you could be a real asshole, not
Absolutely.
You, Chris. No, I don't mean you, Chris. I mean, I mean the you meaning everybody, me, everybody can be a real asshole if you just, always act on whatever your instantaneous emotion is.
Something else I thought was cool that Glenn touched on was just the fact that they were able, as a young band, to trust the producer, to trust Gavin, right. Because when you're young, you you think you know everything. There's ego. There's always other things involved. You're in this, four-headed monster that's this band with these other guys. And I really think that that was crucial to them having the success they had was really learning how to be a band through him. And that's, you can't put a price on that.
No, you cannot. And I thought it was really funny, Chris, because I don't think that I ever really felt this way. I don't know. Maybe you did, but I thought it was funny when he was talking about how, I think he was referencing around the time of All I Want and this album and that moment in their trajectory that he said that the consensus among him and his bandmates is we'd have rather been cool than successful. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, and I can completely relate to that. When my band was young, it was, and you're wanting to buck the system, and we were young punk rockers, and we thought we knew everything, and we didn't.
Right.
I still don't.
Yeah, but I think you can be cool and successful. I think that's what I strive to be. I don't know if I'm that, but that's what I strive to be, both of those things. And the one more thing I wrote down that I liked, and I think in general, and everyone who knows me knows, I'm not a religious person. I'm not a spiritual person. I'm not anything. And when Glenn was kind of reflecting on his upbringing, and he basically said that there was no mysticism in his religious/spiritual background, but the idea that the important thing is to be good to people. And that definitely resonates with me. I had, it's funny, Chris, I told you this, some old guy in my neighborhood knocks on my door, and I think that he's trying to be a good neighbor, but eventually he's just trying to talk to me about religion or whatever. And I said to him, and I believe this, I said, hey man, I don't go to church. I don't do anything like that. But if there is something out there, if there's an afterlife, I like to think the fact that I have tried to be a good person, tried to be a nice person, and cared about other people. I hope that would be enough that whatever this thing is will let me in. And if that's not enough, then I don't want to be there. That's what I told this guy. And I really feel that way,
I'll see you in hell, Chris.
I mean, hell yeah. And speaking of hell, Chris, this was a hell of an episode this week.
It was. Want to thank our guest, Glen Phillips from Toad the Wet Sprocket, for coming by today, and we'll see you next week.
The number you have reached is 100.7 WMMS.
It wasn't just a radio station, it was a lifestyle.
Cleveland is a rock and roll city for sure.
Yeah! Down! The Wrath of the Buzzard. WMMS. Cleveland.
The rise and fall of one of the most iconic radio stations in America. Profiles, The Wrath of the Buzzard. PROH Files. Subscribe now wherever you get podcasts.
Hello out there!
Yes, hello out there, everyone. I'm Hal Schwartz.
And I'm Flynn McLean. Together we host None But the Brave, a podcast dedicated to the music and career of Bruce Springsteen.
Bruce and E Street Band are on tour right now for the first time in 6 years, and we're taking a detailed look at what's happening on stage in our bi-weekly episodes.
We've also been recently joined by some very exciting guests, including rock journalist Warren Zanes and Stephen Hayden, Backstreet's Magazine founder Charles Cross, and Barstool's Kirk Minahan.
If you're a diehard Springsteen fan, this is the show for you.
So please subscribe to None But the Brave on your favorite podcasting platform, and we hope to see you further on up the road.
Thank you so much! We'll be seeing you!